What's up everybody, it's Paul from Boosted Films, and this how-to video is going to be a bit more detailed account of changing the shifter cable bushings for an EVO 8 or 9. Now today I am using the torque solution shifter bushings, but of course this will be useful for you no matter what style bushing you're putting in. Most anything you put in, unless it's really cheap plastic, is going to be better than the OEM bushings you probably have in your car. And this is a relatively cheap modification as well, coming in at about $25. And I do need to say the main reason I bought these and the main reason I wanted to swap them out is initially I had this really sticky shifter. My shifter did not want to basically settle in neutral. It didn't want to go back to centering itself. And I thought the shifter cable bushings would fix my issue. And while I'm glad I did them while I was in there, that wasn't the main problem. So that's going to be added bonus to this video. We're going to show you how to fix those or fix that issue as well if you're having a similar issue with a sticky shifter. So these shifter cable bushings are located on the top of the transmission, and of course to get access to these shifter cable bushings you're going to want to remove your battery. So you'll disconnect your battery and then remove your battery tray as well, and that should give you a much better view of these shifter cable bushings. So here we are under the hood. That area with the blue, that's actually the shifter linkage arm. That blue spot, that's actually where my main cause was with the stickiness. But we're shifting through the gears, showing you a little bit of how this mechanism works. And also I'm going to move some wiring, get it out of the way, make it a little bit easier to not only see what I'm doing, but also get a little better access, because part of the trickiness of this job is just that things can be a little bit tight. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the pins holding these old shifter bushings in place. You can remove the pins holding them, and then any washer that is on there as well, you could pull that washer off. And then you should actually be able to lift off that shifter cable. That shifter cable should come off from these OEM bushings. And of course you're going to have to repeat this process. That larger shifter bushing is more towards the bottom. That smaller one's going to be going towards the top. And it's really that simple, guys. I mean, that's it. Just take your old ones off. Looks easy, right? That's why they say this is actually a 30-minute job, I think, because if nothing was rusted and stuck on in place, this would be a pretty simple job. But the worst part about this job, from my experience, is probably going to be removing your old shifter bushings, especially if they're as rusty and stuck as mine are. So I want to say that as well. If you're looking into tackling this job, be prepared to pretty much destroy your old bushings to get them off. Now, just to get a better view of everything, and just again to fix that other issue I had, I'm going to remove this shifter linkage arm, or where these two arms meet. There's a nut I'm currently removing. You don't need to remove that nut yet, but there's honestly no harm in removing it now if you want to. And then there's a lock washer there as well that we're going to pull off. And what that's going to do is give us access to this shifter linkage arm. We're going to be able to work on that outside the car. Again, a bit hard to view, tough to see, but there are two bolts that hold this other shifter piece in place. You'll get a little better view of this arm once it's out of the car, and then you'll be able to see a bit more about where they're located, but you'll figure this out, where those two bolts are to remove this arm. Again, you don't have to do this part if you were just changing those shifter bushings and your old one just popped off. You should just be able to kind of grease it up a little bit and slide your new one on. But we're going to dive into this a little bit, this arm, and fix our sticky shifter issue here. So here's the piece outside the car. This should move freely, and of course it does not. It's very tight, it's tough. So the good news is, to fix it, it's pretty much free. All you're going to do is sand it down, smooth it out a little bit, put some grease on it, and then that should fix that sticky shifter issue. Not gonna lie though, I spent a long time off camera trying to get this thing free. You just saw me pop it off quickly, but I spent quite a while actually trying to get this thing to come free. So of course, I cleaned it up, greased it, and got it moving freely again. So back to the shifter bushing install, what I like to do before I ever get too far in the project, if I remember, is just kind of check the parts out first, make sure they seem close to what you need to use and that they're gonna fit correctly. Of course, they should. A good company is usually going to put out some good parts, but sometimes in the aftermarket world, you never know. So I did just kind of a quick test fit on these, made sure I could fit them on and that they seemed to be the right size and everything. So next, we're back to that main challenge again. We're going to just pull these off real quick, right? Yeah, they will not really come off. Mine were really tough. So what I ended up doing was basically destroying the old rubber so I could actually get a better grip on that metal piece that was basically stuck in place, that was really just frozen in place. So I spent quite a long time destroying the old rubber and getting that off. Then I tried to utilize 2 vice grips, and that didn't work either. Tried to do something like that. I was trying to spin this free. I figured if I could get it to spin, step 1 was making it rotate on that protruding pin. And once I figured it would do that, I should be able to try and pull it off. So as always, a secret weapon here can be to utilize heat, and that's basically what I ended up having to do here. I used my bolt buster, and that just heated things up, and then that actually broke it free pretty easily. So if you had a torch, you could use that as well. Otherwise, a lot of patience and a lot of time, a lot of liquid wrench or PB blaster or WD-40, all that stuff, whatever you need to do to get that off. But this is probably going to be the worst part of the job. Similar situation here, we're just going to clean things up, sand it down a little bit, try to get that old rust off, and then take that new bushing and make sure it can spin freely and fits pretty well. Next, we're going to go back under the hood and we're going to start dealing with that larger shifter bushing. Now, to give us a bit more access, again here, I'm going to actually unbolt the 2 bolts that hold the shifter cables in place, so I can just push those cables a bit more out of the way as well. And here we are, you can see that larger bushing that's still bolted on to that shifter arm of the transmission here. So I will point out here, if for some reason you actually want to remove this whole arm as well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it's possible. You just have to remove the 4 or 5 bolts holding it in place, plus this one other bolt at the top here, and then you would be able to pull this whole arm out. But there's a gasket in there, you'd have to reseal it and do a lot of stuff. So I would try to avoid doing that if possible. And the good news is I was able to get to mine. I was able to get mine off with it in the car. So if I can do it, you can probably do it, because I don't think your car is going to be as rusty as mine. So this one was a bit trickier, again, because of working in tight space, but I tried to use that to my advantage a little bit, or tried to use the fact that it was still, bolted to the transmission. And what I did is I put a vice grip on it. I spent quite a long time working it forward and back, trying to get it to spin. And once I could get it to spin, I put the screwdriver in, as you see here, up against the vice grip. And I utilized some force from that screwdriver to pry that vice grip over, and then that, of course, was loosening up that part of what was left of the shifter bushing as well. So that was what worked for me to get this one off. So repeating the process, you're going to want to clean that up a little bit. If it was rusty, I'd recommend just lightly sanding it, trying to clean it up. And then we're going to reassemble things, put some grease on. You could use some high temp grease. This was some special Honda grease. I was at the ASM shop and they had some nice grease for me to use, but just something that is going to hold up over time. A little bit of grease to keep things lubricated and keep them from seizing up and getting rusty. So here we're just putting those 2 pieces back together. Again, this was the part that was giving me issues. This is the main reason my shifter was sticky. So we're putting these 2 pieces back together here, and just showing you how it should move freely. I will note this has to go together as one assembly, so you can't really just bolt in that one piece and then add the other piece on top of it, because there is this little plastic section that you'll see that kind of goes up on that other shifter arm, and you need that plastic piece in place when you put this whole shifter linkage up. Again, tight spot to film, so I apologize if you feel like all you're looking at is my shoulder. It's a bit tough to show some of this while you're working on it at the same time. But here we are, just showing you that I did have that shifter linkage in place. And then, of course, you're going to tighten up the 2 bolts that hold that shifter arm on. So I'll spare you looking at the back of my shirt and just let you know, of course, that I tighten up those bolts. I would recommend you do the same. Obviously, tighten up the bolts that hold that shifter linkage in place. And then you should be able to put the lock washer back on and that nut back on as well to tighten up that nut that holds the 2 shifter linkage arms together. Here's just the top view showing you what it looks like. As you can tell, I painted these 2 pieces a little bit too, just because they were pretty rusty. Next, we're going to install that larger shifter bushing here. It should just slide on. Another reason why I would also, maybe lightly sand is just because you do need it to kind of slide on all the way in order to get that pin in to hold it in place. So you want to make sure it can slide on in place. And then you should be able to put the shifter linkage back on. And these come with more of a C-clip type style clip here that should hold them in place. Again, tough to view, tough to see on camera, but you're going to have to use some force and press that C-clip in place. And finally, you're just going to put that pin in as well to hold everything in place. Next, we're going to move on to that smaller bushing, that one that faces straight up. Put a little grease on it, throw it in place, and then you should be able to put your shifter cable on that one as well. Of course, just repeating the process here, so you're going to do the same thing on this one. Those C-clamps can be a little bit tricky to get on, so if you have something like a screwdriver or something that's a little bit longer that you can utilize to get leverage, you can use that. If it's too tough to pop on with your fingers, you're actually going to see that here where I utilize a screwdriver just to give myself a little extra force to pop that clip on. And that final step is, of course, just putting that pin in place as well. That should just push in and push through the hole. And you have basically successfully changed your shifter cable bushings at that point. Don't forget to tighten down that bracket that holds your shifter cables in place if you did loosen that up like I did. So we're going to put those 2 bolts back in place. And of course, tighten everything up that we loosened. Little breather filter on the transmission here. We're going to put that back in place as well. And before we decide to put everything completely back together, what we should be able to do at this point is just get in the car and test things out. My shifter still took a little while. You can actually see here it took a little bit. It slowly kind of settled back. It took a bit for everything to kind of work in to get rid of that stickiness. But it definitely made things a lot better. I'm glad I did both these items while I was in there. These shifter cable bushings should give you a little cleaner, crisper feeling shift. You should be able to feel things a little bit nicer when you're kind of shifting through the gears. And it should eliminate just some of that general shifter play that you might have from worn out, OEM bushings. And if you're still with me and you just wanted to see me finish this job, yes, I did, put it all back together. So you're going to put your battery tray back in place, put your battery back in, connect your terminals, and then you should be good to go. Your shifter should be working a lot better than it was. And that is about it for this how-to video. I appreciate everybody watching. Of course, I don't pretend that I always know all the answers or did everything right. So if you have comments, if I did anything wrong, let me know. If you found a better way to make things work, let me know that as well. I appreciate the discussion continuing in the comment section. Also, if there are any big updates, I will put them in the video description as well, so you could check for any updates there too. So, as always, this is Paul from Boosted Films, saying thanks so much for watching.